We are joined today by Dr. Mixchel Domingues, Assistant Professor in the Literacy, Early Bilingual, and Special Education Department at the Kremen School of Education and Human Development at Fresno State. Dr. Domingues, thank you for being with us here today.
My pleasure.
And we're going to talk about your experience in the ACUE Effective Teaching Practices program. But before we get into that, would you mind taking a moment to tell us about the students and the classes that you teach?
Sure. I teach credential students in the multiple subject teacher education credential. I teach action research, a series, and then those are two of my courses. And then I also supervise masters of early childhood students who are doing their field work and their master's thesis or projects.
So these are pre-service teachers on their way to the classroom?
Yes, in the classroom, yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Great. Okay, so let's talk about ACUE here. I believe it was a four-course series that you were a part of, focusing on things from inclusive learning environments to active learning to learner-centered courses. Uh, First, what made you sign up for the program?
So when I was a grad student, my advisor invited me to participate in a project as a coordinator. And so I spent 4 years engaged in a project that might otherwise have been spent teaching. And my teaching experience is relatively limited, I think, compared to other incoming professors. And so I was super excited to get a chance to develop more skills in teaching. And it was my first time, it was only my second year of teaching synchronous online courses. I had the bulk of my experience in asynchronous.
So what were some key takeaways from the program for you?
I really appreciated that there were like immediate uh benefits as far as being able to turn around and apply them. I've organized them into like 8 different skill sets that I developed. So first, I was able to really start to learn how to analyze, revise, and develop course outcomes and learning objectives, and how to connect those to course assignments, activities, and assessments as clearly mapped in the syllabus and in lectures for the students. So that was a major progress. A second one was I really loved the section on students' internalization of negative stereotypes about their academic abilities and how those can be reduced or eliminated by setting high standards and a belief in my students' abilities to meet those standards, offering them choices, specific directed praise, using grades to communicate progress, to minimize anxiety. So that equity dimension was particularly helpful for me to adjust my teaching strategies. The third one was around how to develop well-constructed rubrics. I really liked the equity dimension to that because I had a resistance to rubrics and checklists, which actually save time in grading, which has proven to be true. I also appreciated a fourth one was how to gather mid-semester feedback from my students and prompts to ask them, like, I learned the most in class when, or I learned the least in class when, what I like best, suggestions for improvement, that then I could tweak and adjust my teaching midterm based on their feedback and giving them space for their feedback and voices. The fifth one was really learning a lot about how to engage my students in group activities, noticing that there was a lack of participation. And so being able to quickly implement tools like informing them of why we do group learning, criteria for participating in discussions, which I wasn't doing, awarding grades for participation, requiring students to self-grade their discussions. That's something I'd like to do in the future. And explaining how discussions are effective in helping them to learn and to facilitate them with their students, their children. How to plan effective class discussions. It really helped me around creating thought-provoking questions and how to set it up like a complex idea to break it down for them. I also liked a suggestion around limiting my talk during discussions and creating an environment that really centers the students' participation in their learning experience. As a newer professor, I get nervous and talk too much. And so really learning how to be mindful through this course around the discomfort of sitting sometimes with the 7 seconds of quiet waiting for that discussion, and centering group discussion over lecture. The 7th one is I really appreciated ACUE helping me with how to enhance students' intrinsic motivation. 8th, I really liked how ACUE helped me to, like I said, break down complex concepts, breaking them down into appropriate steps, providing written directions, modeling in class, creating a video if it's really complicated, which some of mine are. 9th, and my final one, alongside this idea of how to break down complex ideas and not proposing too many in one class, using concept maps to help students connect ideas between the course topics. I really needed help with that. So those are not all of the things that I learned and began to implement, but those are the ones that really I was like deeply satisfied. Mainly
That's
in my peer review, I could see a difference.
oh, okay. Yeah, in what way? Can you expand on that?
I got better reviews.
Okay.
Um, I had better relationships with my students by that point because I'd been implementing these tools for all those weeks. So the difference between my peer reviews in the fall and my peer reviews in the spring, I literally got better reviews. I got all excellent instead of just good. And I got better feedback and I felt more confident because all of these tools helped me to have better relationships and foster a sense of belonging and community with my students.
I was writing as you were talking, and I've got questions about all of the things you were talking about. But
Yeah,
what one of the things that I'm curious about is you said you had a resistance to rubrics.
yeah.
What was that, just wanting to give more leeway, or not wanting to have such standardized responses? Where did that come from?
I have students, particularly my credential students. I come from preschool, early childhood, and we have a lot of freedom in the preschool settings I've grown up in, I guess you could say. And so the course I teach is inquiry, and that's my strong suit because I have a lot of freedom before all the standardization and the all of that begins. And so I like to think of myself as a social constructivist. I'm very open-ended. I encourage a lot of creativity. But the truth is that I'm a big picture thinker. I don't like details. And when students in my class, which a lot of these teacher credential students got to Fresno State by checking off the boxes and playing by the rules, they show up in my class, and if they're particularly um, mm, wanting more structure, they're gonna not enjoy getting to know me. Once they get to know me, they kind of develop a trust and they see how it works. But what ACUE helped me to do is not to hide behind my philosophy, my pedagogical approach as a way to avoid providing clear instructions and structure, even though I don't like structure, for students who particularly, their learning style is that they want more structure, to be more equitable to them, but also to make my grading more fair. So I had a student at one point basically say, hey, is there a rubric for this final assignment? And I was like, so annoyed. I was just like, oh, here we go again with the freaking rubric. You just want to check off boxes. You don't want to be creative. You want me to tell you what to do. This is a whole problem with our educational system. We're all looking for the correct answer, blah, 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 blah. But I was taking the class and there was instructions for how to do it. I'd never had that before. And I said, hey, I want to be responsive to your request. I know some of you really do like rubrics. This is why I resist them, but I'm willing to learn. And so I learned how to do it. I made one, and not only did it help the students that wanted one, it didn't take away from the creativity. And my next group of students in particular really benefited from it. So that was the rubric experience.
And as you were talking about, building that relationship with the students helps you to be more responsive in a situation like that.
Yeah, yeah, and then the AQ towards the end here, now they're talking about how you can improve upon your rubrics as you go, and I sure as heck, I am improving upon the rubrics as I go. So it's pretty cool, actually. I'm a lot more open-minded to them, and my eventual goal is to co-construct them with the students.
Oh, wow. That'd be great. Yeah.
I know, right?
So, I mean, so something you mentioned there is, especially with the early childhood students having a little bit more freedom and not being so tied to some of the standards with state testing and everything. How do you feel like what you were learning with AQ aligns or differs from what you're, teaching with your students to take to
I
their
really
classrooms?
appreciate that question.
Okay.
I really appreciate that question. I'm not gonna lie, there was some fighting and kicking through the AQ. I have specific critiques about it. I resisted it along the way, even up until, these last modules, there's been moments of resistance. Because I feel like, maybe these professors don't hold the same pedagogical values that I do, and they're more mainstream. Well, that being said, the fact is, at the end of the day, if I'm not effective, it doesn't matter what I believe, right? If the students don't understand what the heck I'm talking about, and they're just like, what the heck, then where does that get me? Um, so I still kick and scream a little bit, but I have to say, I've drank the AQ Kool-Aid and I'm into it. I'm grateful because it works, is what it is.
So what one last question on the things that you brought up, and then we'll move on, is you talked about limiting your talk and centering group discussion over lecture. Um, how do you feel? Because sometimes students don't like that. Students want you to get up and just talk at them and
Mhm,
you deposit your knowledge into them and they write it down as notes or whatever. And if
mhm.
you say, no, you all are going to prepare and then come in to talk, you get some resistance from students that way. Did you feel that? Have you implemented that, or is that something you're still working with?
Actually, I felt the opposite. I
Okay,
felt
great.
like these guys are so exhausted and so overwhelmed, and all of their other classes are so standardized and prescribed and high pressure that my goal is to make this course more hands-on and interactive for them, because I could see, especially once I started practicing the tools for how to facilitate productive group discussions, because these guys, I didn't understand why they were like clamming up with each other and like not talking. Sometimes they'd go in their little breakout rooms. I don't know if they knew I could see them, which then I started to clarify my expectations to let them know, hey, I can see you guys. In case you don't know, I see your cameras are off and your microphones are off the whole time. How you come back sharing what you discussed, I do not know. That part's still a mystery. But once I was able to engage some of those tools, the level of energy in the breakout rooms and when they came back was remarkable. And so AQ has very specific suggestions like don't lecture for more than 10 minutes, don't introduce more than whatever, how many, topics. I would have these guys hostage. I'd be giving lectures that were like half an hour with like, on average, seven like major complicated ideas. You know what I mean? So, my experience has been they actually really want more hands-on and to engage with each other in community.
So speaking of engaging, how was the program as a learner or a participant yourself? The AQ experience.
So in that regard, I felt a little bit like I was being mm, delivered the material in a way that I don't like for school to be like so predictable and prescribed and you do this, we do this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless I was interested in the topic, and it's just challenging enough that you kind of have to pay attention, but I took it very seriously most of the time, so I did learn a lot. The other thing was I felt like a lot of the classrooms that they showed us were like, I don't know, Ivy League or not CSU from an equity standpoint. It kind of seemed like in my mind, a lot of the, keynote speakers were not BIPOC, and a lot of the instructors and adjuncts were. The ones making mistakes were disproportionately BIPOC in my mind. I didn't like that.
Last question for you. What's next on your teaching journey? Are there areas from this that you want to dig into more or directions that you think you want to explore further?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've I've heard of the scholarship of teaching and learning. I do want to keep learning. What I said was I'd like to repeat this whole thing again. Honestly, I feel like you need to do it like 2 times at least just to really start to hone it down. So my only concern is, will I continue to implement? Will I remember the things that I wanted to try that I didn't even get a chance to? Will I go back and look at the material to try to figure out what it was AQ was trying to teach me so that I could do it? So I'd love like a part 2 that was a lot of the same material, but not the same. Yeah. So I think AQ has a side to it that's not really my jam,
Yeah.
but I am super, super grateful and there's a lot of good to it.
Yeah. I think we get that with some of the more progressive educators,
Okay.
which is not bad. It's not bad to challenge some of the orthodoxy. Like we need that,
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It would actually be interesting to read an article on how progressive educators experience the AQ
Mm.
training. Or to have a progressive perspective, have one of the
Mhm.
professors identify as progressive. I don't know. You had to kind of figure out who was and who wasn't.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, Dr. Dominguez. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about your AQ experience.
I appreciate it. It's nice to be able to process it. Thank you.
To learn more, visit our website, academics.fresnostate.edu/ideas, or contact us to share your story, ideas@mail.fresnostate.edu.